Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are considering Pratyahara, and today we are going to understand various types of Pratyahara which Vyasa has mentioned in his text, which is an important guideline for the seekers. The first type of Pratyahara that he mentions is in the words Shabdadishu Avyasanam Indriya Jaya Kechit. So he says some of the acharyas hold and believe that Shabdadishu Avyasanam, non-addiction to sensory objects, not to be addicted to Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, Vishayas of the senses. So, Avyasanam, not addicted, because Vyasanam means addicted, addiction. So we are all addicted to these Vishayas, Aindrika Vishayas, which are Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, the five objects of five senses. It is not only that we perceive them, it's not only that we have instruments to perceive them, but we have addiction to them. Like addicted person cannot remain without consuming that item for a long time. He returns back to consumption of that particular object for which he has addiction. So we all actually have addiction to these objects of the senses. And not to be addicted, not to have addiction, is Indriya Jaya. So that is something which is giving us a guideline. We can consume the sensory objects. It is not necessary that we should be starving without those objects, without consumption of those objects. But we have to see that we are not getting addicted to them. Addicted people go on returning back to their addiction. Every couple of hours and every other day, they will go back to that object for which they are addicted. So not to be addicted itself is a kind of pratyahara. So it also suggests that we have Vishaya Dhyaasa. We have obsession for these sensory objects. We cannot be too long away from the objects. So that is called Dhyaasa. And not to have this Dhyaasa itself is a kind of Pratyahara. So we do get some lesson here to be inculcating Vairagya, the Pratyahara, as to what we should do. So we have to check whether we are having any Vyasana, any addiction, any Vishaya Dhyaasa. That itching demand starts cropping up every now and then. Like we become hungry after a couple of hours. We become thirsty after a couple of hours. And then without taking water or taking food, we are just mad. Now that means that we should not be having such irresistible hunger and thirst for objects. We might consume it as and when we need it. But there should not be itching condition that we start getting an itch for those objects and their consumption. So that needs to be overcome. That is what is the first kind of Vairagya that Vyasa mentions. It is of the nature of Shabdadishu Avyasanam. And even that is a kind of Indriya Jaya. to some extent, that shows that we have conquered these senses, that we are not slaves of those objects. Now coming to the second type, Shabdadi Samprayoga Svechaya iti Anye. Some other acharyas have posited, now these are all positions that acharyas have taken, yogacharyas have taken at different point in time, and Vyasa is mentioning about those. So there are some authorities on yoga who says Shabdadi Samprayoga Svechaya iti Ante. So it is by one's own desire that one will consume the object, and the objects will not be alluring, objects will not be enticing. Not that the person doesn't at all consume objects, it is within his control. That is Svecha. So Svechaya Samprayoga, he contacts the objects on his own will, on his own accord, and objects don't exercise any gravity. So whether to contact the object or not to contact the object is in the hands of this reformed person. So he can establish contact, he can cut the contact, he can have connectivity, he can have disconnectivity. So he will connect and disconnect on his own. Now that is also a kind of Indriya Jaya. So in Bhoga Vishayas is Sva-Tantra, not Sva-Tantra, Sva-Tantra. So he is not Bhoga Tantra, he is Sva-Tantra. Our case is that we are not Sva-Tantra, we are Bhoga Tantra. So Sva-Tantra is not to be understood as Vairagya. Independent and independent. We know the word independent, but actually the word is independent. So there is a control from within. So at this point in time we should understand the difference between Svairachara and Sva-Tantra. So Svairachara is actually Vasana Tantra. One who is independent, actually he is Vasana dependent. So independent person is tendency dependent. He has tendencies and is dependent on the tendencies. So he is Vasana Tantra or he is Vishaya Tantra. Whereas a reformed person here is not like that. He is Sva-Tantra. He has his own control over those. Now these independent people, so-called independent people in the realm of psychology that we consider, they are actually Vasana Tantra. They are tendency Tantra. They are dependent on their propensities. So that also gives us some kind of inquiry into the concept of being independent and independent. Swatantra and Sva-Tantra. Now coming to the third type. Now this is of Jnani and Adhikari Purusha. This is of a person who has reached a level of consciousness which proves that he is philosophically on a higher plane of consciousness. So he has that adhikara, he is Adhikari Purusha. So he interacts with the objects without whatsoever raga-dvesha, attachment, aversion. So this is a person who is on a philosophically higher plane. Uh, so without raga lobha, without lobha moha, without raga-dvesha, he partakes objects. Rather than crazily partaking the pleasures from objects, he partakes, not that he doesn't partake any objects, shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha kind of things. But without raga-dvesha, without lobha moha, without attachment aversion, without likes and dislikes, without any sukha dukha, he does the Vishaya Sevanam. Whereas our case is that if we consume certain objects, we are happy, and if we have to consume some other kinds of objects, we are unhappy. So our happiness and unhappiness depends upon our interaction with the objects, which objects we have partaken. Sometimes they are desirable, sometimes they are undesirable. When desirable, we are happy. When undesirable, we are unhappy, we are saddened. Now this doesn't happen to this Adhikari Purusha. He is free from pains and pleasures and therefore raga-dvesha. And that is also a kind of Indriya Jaya. So Bhashyakara tells us raga-dvesha bhave Sukha Dukha Shunyam Shabdade Jnanam Indriya Jaya iti kechit. So some other acharyas opine raga-dvesha bhave, raga-dvesha bhave, without a bhava or without presence of raga-dvesha, with absence of raga-dvesha, so raga-dvesha bhave Sukha Dukha Shunyam. There is no Sukha Dukham, whether object is partaken or object was not partaken, whether the object was consumed or not consumed, whether the object was received or not received, whether the object was got or not got. Sukha Dukha Shunyam. There is no pain and pleasure. And that Shabdadi Jnanam, in that equanimity, equalness of the mind, is also Indriya Jaya. Anyway, this is a kind of Indriya Jaya on a higher plane of consciousness. This is not our case. Because our case is that in the world we have objects of our attachment, aversions and likes and dislikes, whereby we get pleasure or absence of pleasure, or sorrow or absence of sorrow. So we are caught in the mesh of pains and pleasures, while these ones who are philosophically on a higher pedestal are beyond raga-dvesha, sukha dukkha, raga-lobha, etc. Therefore they are called Adhikari Purusha. So, not that they don't consume objects. They do consume objects, but very neutrally. So this is because of their consciousness and its level, which is quite above the normal stasi. And this is because of satsanga, sadhana sangha, shastra sangha. They are given high priority by this master. Then the ahara, viharadi, chatushyam. So they score enormous priority. Yagna, dana, tapa principle. They score enormous importance in the life of such people, and therefore they are able to have such a conduct of life. So that is the third kind of Indriya Jaya which got mentioned. Now in Sadhaka Avastha, that is a neophyte plane, in the seekerhood, which is our case, like ahimsa, satyadi principles, the pratyahara also has to be vrata rupa. We will have to start practicing vrata rupa pratyahara. So we have seen what is vrata, what is vow, anuvratam. Anuvratam comes for the neophytes and beginners. So we must also take small dosages of pratyahara, like taking a vow, so which is for a day or so, which is for a day or week or so on and so forth, and particular occasion where we have facility to be restrained and we have facility to be moderate, temperate. And we have seen the Vrata Vaikalya aspects earlier. So Pratyahara sadhana is also like Vrata Vaikalya sadhana. So our Pratyahara is in Vytthana Avastha, while the accomplished ones, their Pratyahara is in Nirodha Avastha. There is a overweighing condition of Nirodha Samskar, and Pratyahara surfaces. In our case, that is not the case. The Vytthana is on the surface and we try to practice. It is an austerity for us. So, we are given certain occasions which we consider during the Vratas, Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya Vratas, that such as Navaratra, Chaturmas, Shravanamas, Upasana Kala. So we have such occasions where we have to harvest the benefit of the atmospheres, and even Pratyahara must be inculcated in small bits and pieces first, rather than going for a huge, strong, unwieldy kind of observance of Pratyahara. So we have the days such as Vratas on Ekadashi, then the Somvar Vrata, Guruvar Vrata, Chaturthi Vrata, Shanivar Vrata. So there are so many vows which we have considered on an earlier occasion. They are called Vrata Parva, and we can take advantage of Vrata Parvas to develop Vairagya potential in us. Then there are times such as Mahashivratri, Navaratri, Sri Ramanavami, Sri Krishnashtami, Datta Jayanti, Sri Ganesh Jayanti, Hanuman Jayanti. So these are the occasions where we can avail of the advantage of the cultural atmosphere and are at advantage to be practicing the Pratyahara. So after mentioning these, Vyasa mentions a Vairagya, that is of Yoga Vrata. So that is the Pratyahara of a yogi. So his statement here is taken from Acharya called Jaigishavya. Jaigishavya was one of the yoga acharyas who is well known in the literature of the lore, like Puranas. So he has opined Chittaikagrat apratipratireveti Jaigishavyaha. Chittaikagrat. So this is a yogic type of Pratyahara. Yogi is Pratyahara. There is a Chittaikagriya, and because of Chittaikagriya, there is non-appearance of the objects in the mind, non-appearance of any gravity in the mind for objects, nor insulation of objective gravities to the Chitta. The Chitta is insulated. Even if the objects are around, objects do not entice, and there is also no spontaneous kind of tendency making headway for objects. So that is Ekagra Bhumi, references to Ekagra Bhumi. which we know is quite beyond the horizon for us. And in Ekagra Bhumi means it is Samprajnata Bhumi. There is the Chitta Samskruti in Samprajnata Bhumi, Chitta or Samprajnat Samadhi. And that is also an Indriya Jaya, kind of Indriya Jaya. That is actually Paramavashyata. That is supreme control over the objects. So this is that culture of the mind where there is no spiking. Like it happens to us, and sometimes we are moderate, sometimes we are crazy, cranky, sometimes we are very sensual, sometimes we are temperate and moderate. So it goes up and down for us, the tendencies. So sometimes the tendencies are low, that is, sensory tendencies are low, and sometimes sensory tendencies are high. So when they are high, there is a sensuality, and when it is a low, when we don't have that sensuality, so it goes up and down in our minds. This should be noted, where our mind is graphically presented. But the one that is just now mentioned by Jaigishavya Acharya, it is really cent% Pratyahara, and it is structured by Abhyasa Vairagya. So that is the Vairagya which is spoken of with reference to yogis. So in short, let us just once again shortlist or briefly look at these forms. Shabdadi Vishaya Anasakti is the first. Not to be under the grip of objects. That's the first. And then Svecha, Sva-Tantra. One is quite independent in Vishaya Vinivartanam and Vishaya Vinivartanam. Whether to take the objects or reject the objects is completely in one's control. Then comes the third one, which is Samyasta vritti, Jnanotkarsha, and therefore Vishaya Vinivartanam. Therefore objects are kept at bay. It is because of raga-dvesha viraitata. Mind not having raga-dvesha or lobha moha. That's the Samyasta vritti. Asceticism is there in such a mind. That's the third one. And the fourth one is of the Ekagra Bhumi, which is of yogi. So these are the kinds of Indriya Jaya which the Shastra mentions. So when the Chitta is Niruddha, when there is Chitta Nirodha, then there is also Nirodha in Indriya. You cannot say that Chitta has restraint but the senses are grazing in their fields. This doesn't happen. And all the senses are simultaneously under restraint because of Nirodha Dharma. And all the senses are Pratyahara. So it is to be understood that there is no chance of one sense in Pratyahara and other sense not in Pratyahara. If there is a Pratyahara, all the senses simultaneously are in Pratyahara. All the Indriyas are simultaneously in Pratyahara. This is an important point to be noted. We have seen the Indriyas of Jnana, Indriyas of Karma, Indriyas of Antakarana, Indriyas of the body, embodiment, incarnation. All these organs will have Pratyahara simultaneously and not isolated. This is a point to be taken note of. So we considered that aspect of types of Indriya Jaya which Vyasa has mentioned in his commentary while dealing with Pratyahara. Now let's come down to ground zero and let us try to take some precepts in our sadhaka avastha, in our seekership as seekers. Let's try to understand the ayana, niyamanam, sanyamanam, niyantranam of the Indriyas. And it starts with Indriya Sanghata. It starts from Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas. So something has to be done there. Reformation to start with for a neophyte begin there. So that is first one. The second one, it should start from the plane of Chitta as well. How does it begin from the plane of Chitta? It begins from Satsanga, etc. So the one begins from sensory control. We must have reins in the hands and control our senses and their tendencies. This is a aspect of discipline in life. We have to discipline our life. We have to discipline our tendencies. We have to discipline our sensory tendencies. So discipline is the first thing for a seeker. And the second one starts from the plane of Chitta, that is to regularly, with high priority, go for satsanga, sadhana sangha, shastra sangha, and also give importance to satvik, ahar, vihar, achar, vichar, and also come under the influence of principle of yajna, dana, tapas. So, one effort is from senses to in chitta, and the other one is from chitta to senses. We have to attempt both. This is to be noted here. So, in our case, the Vairagya must commence from both the ends. From senses to chitta is one way, and the other one is from chitta to senses. And I have briefly mentioned these two ways just now. So that has to be taken note of. In yogic pratyahara, it is from chitta to indriyas. The pratyahara blooms and blossoms from chitta dharma towards indriyas, and it engulfs the senses. While in our case this is not a strong force, provided we have sufficient priority to satsanga, sadhana sangha, shastra sangha. But then we have another way, channel, which we can be operating is to go from senses and from senses to chitta. So these are two ways which the sadhaka has to handle. Now sadhaka has to again try to recapitulate how satsanga is, what is satsanga. It is sattva sangha, sadhu sangha, santa sangha. What is sadhana sangha? It is sthula sharir sadhana, sukshma sharir sadhana, karana sharir sadhana. Then shastra sangha, paramartha, adhyatma, moksha shastra, dharma shastra, vedanta shastra. So we must soak ourselves into studies of these shastras. So that is what we have to see how we will go about. Anyway, it would commence primarily with the discipline for seekers. So that means it is from Indriya towards the Chitta. And in Siddhavastha, it comes from Chitta toward the senses. But we also have to see that we also try to tackle with the second channel by way of the yoga achara. Achara of yoga, conduct in yoga, that is by way of satsanga, shastra sangha, sadhana sangha. The Jnanotkarsha is important. Adhyatma Jnana. We must sufficiently give priority to Adhyatma Jnana. So that will certainly work for the other channel of Pratyahara, which is the essential channel of Pratyahara of a yogi. And by the Pratyahara, it is not just that the senses are shunned from their objects, but there is Jnanotkarsha. That is the way of Jnanam. See, our worldly Jnana comes by our senses open. Our senses must function. Then we get the empirical knowledge, worldly knowledge. If the senses are closed, we will not be getting that and will be deprived of the worldly knowledge. But in Adhyatma Jnana, the Pratyahara is the one which gives the Jnanam. And I recall Bhagavad Gita 2.58, Yada sambrate cha ayam purmu angani vasarvasha indriyani indriyarthebhya tasya prajna pratisthita. This is the wonderful passage that you get in Bhagavad Gita. This is Sthita Prajna Darshana passage of Bhagavad Gita. It's a marvelous piece which comes in second chapter. So there Bhagavan says, like a tortoise draws all its organs under the shell, similarly the yogi draws all the senses inside, and therefore the indriyas are no longer now in intercourse with the objects. And then his prajna is pratisthita. He gets that prajna. The sthita prajna is a wise person, a spiritually wise person. And by sensory restraint, one gets that spiritual wisdom. So it is important in Viveka sadhana, Jnana sadhana, Adhyatma Jnana sadhana that the senses are reformed, senses are indrawn, and they are not let out on their grazing fields. So, Pratyahara is a means of knowledge. Closing and benumbing all the senses is deprivation of knowledge, deprivation from knowledge. But Pratyahara is means of knowledge. This is an important point to be noted. So Sanyatendriya is the word that often comes in spiritual texts. Rather than keeping the senses under no restraint, laissez-faire policy, libertine senses, this is going to thwart spiritual path for a seeker. And therefore this sensory restraint is so important. Then yoga technology also offers certain techniques. And I recall a verse from Yoga Bhashya which beautifully describes the equanimity of mind, equalness of the mind, what we call as sthita prajna, to which just now a reference was made. So we do get such kind of prajna, but when we are on a tower top, when we are on the top of a peak of a mountain, and when we look around, everything is below us. And when we look down, everything appears to be of minuscule size. All that we have vision from, say, tower top or hilltop, there our vision doesn't have attachment aversion. Because we cannot identify the specifics of objects. We see the cars moving which are less than an inch in length. We see the Lilliput people walking on the streets. They are hardly 2-3 inches of height, and we watch them. So we cannot identify who is who and what is what, and therefore our minds are in balance. This is worth experimenting. Get onto the tower top and look below, under those tiny houses, small houses which seem to be like toy houses, and those tiny vehicles moving on the streets, people walking on the streets who do not even have a height of a finger. And then we look at them in equal vision, because it doesn't trigger attachment aversion, and there is no Sukha Dukha. We look at them with a balanced mind. So yogi is always in such a case as if mounted on a girishikara, on a mountain top, as if he is mounted on a mountain top, and from there he looks at the world under. And that's a beautiful description which comes in his commentary. This is called Shailastha Drushti, which comes in the first chapter, Chitta Parikarma. So we can also experience this when we are on a tower top, and when we look down, there is no attachment and attraction for anything. We are not attracted by anything, because everything is tiny, little, small. So that is the Shailastha Vritti. So we can also experience equal mind, even mind, when we are on tower top. Now, incidentally, let me tell you about little interesting thing about our eyes, our vision, visual organ. We go and get our eyes checked from an ophthalmologist, and that is the way to test our eyes. But we also we commoners test the eyes of others. What do we test? We try to test their minds. So by looking at somebody's eyes, we can figure out something about the mind of the person. That the person is happy, person is sad, person is sorrowed, person is in delight, person is angry. So we read the mind by looking at the eyes of another person. That is another way of examining the eyes, which is not the way that eyes are examined in optometrics by an ophthalmologist. So we can also read the eyes objectively of another person, and then ascertain that the person is Sukha Avastha, that is in pleasure, Dukha Avastha, that is in sorrows, Tanavagrastha, that is in stress and tension, Chinta Agrastha, that is in worry, anxiety, Tapagrastha, that is agitated, vexed, tormented, or Traga-grastha, having similar meaning, Bechaini, restlessness, Krodha, anger, lobha, greed and avarice, moha, infatuation, kama-tura, that means overcome by sensuality, moha-grastha, madanvita, that is arrogance, arrogant person. From the eyes we can make out that somebody is arrogant. Or caught in heva matsara, caught in jealousy and malice and envy. You can read the eyes and figure out to some extent the state of the mind of a person. Vichara magna, in profound thought process. Looking at the eyes, we know that person is in a profound thought process. Or from looking at the eyes, we know that a person is busy browsing some memory file. So eyes will tell us that person is trying to scratch the memory and is opening that memory file and browsing into memory file, doesn't remember, and therefore is in act of remembering something. It is quite visible from the eyes. We can also make out somebody is in deep thought process, manana chintana. We can also read from the eyes that somebody is in compassion. Somebody is overflowing with compassion, magnanimity. Somebody is overflowing with mamata, the love, friendliness, maya. We can also fathom that somebody is in hatred from eyes. Though somebody is contented and somebody not contented, somebody having aspirations bubbling and somebody completely accomplished in purpose. So all this can be fathomed by looking at the eyes of a person. So similarly, one must make habit of reading one's own senses and try to figure out the difference between the state of mind and the state of eyes. Eyes are very sensitive organs amongst the 5 cognitive organs. So, during the practice of yoga, we must objectify our own eyes and their state. That will tell us about our state of mind also. And we will read the compatibility between the state of mind and state of eyes. Then in yoga, in asanas and pranayamas, you have panchavayu shvasanam. In udanavayu shvasanam, it is unique face, unique eyes, unique senses. So that must be fathomed. The brain and the face are in unique state when it is udana vayu breathing in yogasana and in pranayam. Udana kriya is Vishuddhi chakra kriya. Then we will be also able to associate Vishuddhi chakra with our chitta and the culture of chitta and our senses and culture of the senses. So in various Panchavayu pranayam, Panchavayu kriya in asanas, we must try to read our senses and our mind. And if this practice of yoga is also supported by satsanga, sadhana sangha, shastra sangha, then of course there will be a quantum leap. So yoga technology has enormous instruments and technology provided to us. The yogopangas, the yogangas, which should be shvasa pradhana, prana pradhana, chitta pradhana, then we get that advantage. And yoga teaches us how to make something shvasa pradhanam, prana pradhanam, and chitta pradhanam. And then Pratyahara has a bodily component which we spoke of on an earlier occasion. The esoteric physiology also tells us about the bodily components for Pratyahara. Then there is biochemistry in our hands to be handled, electrochemistry to be handled, and therefore there is enormous scope for us to really carry out a pursuit in the realm of Pratyahara while we are doing asana, pranayam and dhyan. So also inculcating the principles of karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, there will be a great bonanza. Then there is the laya kriya that comes in Ashtadasha Mahakriyas of asanas, which again opens out a mind for Pratyahara. And of course, Ahar, Vihar, Achar, which are very sattvic. Then Samskruti, the culture of consciousness, they all work mightily. Then we understand, we sum up by saying, Ahara Shuddho Sattva Shuddhi. Pratyahara needs Sattva Shuddhi and Ahara Shuddhi does Sattva Shuddhi. So all kinds of intakes would be taken into account for really chart out a plan for Pratyahara. So with this we have tried to consider the Pratyahara Anga of Ashtanga Yoga. Only one thing remains to be considered, that Patanjali speaks about two planes of in Ashtanga Yoga. One is called Bahiranga plane, the other one is Antaranga plane. Up to Pratyahara it is said to be Bahiranga. They are Bahirangas, and after Pratyahara they are said to be Antarangas. Pratyahara becomes the threshold. And therefore we will have to spare one more session on understanding the position of Pratyahara, which comes in the middle of yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. It's a fifth limb. Although arithmetically it is not in the middle, because 8 limbs, if you divide them into 4 and 4, the fifth is coming at the head of the second division. So in that sense it is also threshold. So in that sense it comes in the middle. And of course Patanjali expressly mentions that Pratyahara is the threshold of Bahiranga and Antaranga. So let us try to understand this concept of threshold in Bahiranga Antaranga, but that is next time. Namaskar all of you.